My name's Marcus Reed, 52, born and raised on the kind of land you don't just own, you inherit with responsibility. 12 acres in Pine Ridge, North Carolina, wrapped around a spring-fed lake my grandfather bought in 1952. Every sound here carries history, boots crunching over the same gravel path he laid, the lake water clear enough to mirror the cypress trees, bees breaking the surface at dawn. This isn't just property. It's legacy. For 70 years, our family kept the water pure, the dock sturdy, the air clean with honeysuckle and mineral scent. That dock, built in 1987, fully permitted, still stands where he placed it. But peace never survives long when progress comes calling. 15 years ago, developers rolled in, leveling fields and carving roads through what used to be tobacco country. They called it Willow Creek Estates. 847 homes starting at $600,000 each. McMansions, manicured lawns, and an HOA built on control. Within 6 months, Vivien Blackwater, a sharp-tongued real estate attorney with a Lexus and a leather planner, made herself president. 3 months later, she sent me a certified letter, official paper, lawyer tone, claiming my unsightly fishing violated community aesthetics. Apparently my dock and my morning peace were offensive to her property values. My attorney, Tom Martinez, laughed when I showed him the letter. "Marcus," he said, "your land predates the HOA. Their rules can't reach you." Vivien didn't take that well. When letters failed, the noise began. Dawn after dawn, landscapers roaring on her side of the property line. The message was clear. That's how it started. A quiet lake, a legacy family, and one HOA president determined to make someone else's peace her business. 2 weeks after the county inspector laughed off Vivien's illegal dock complaint, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd move on. I was wrong. See, people like Vivien don't quit when they're wrong. They double down. Early one Tuesday morning, I looked out my kitchen window and saw a full survey crew on her lawn. Tripods, laser scanners, bright orange vests, all staring at my shoreline like it was a crime scene. They spent 6 hours measuring the same boundary my grandfather marked in 1952, with concrete posts solid enough to survive the next ice age. 3 days later, another letter arrived. Registered mail, gold seal, legal letterhead. According to Vivien's hired experts, my dock extended 6 inches into community water rights. 6 inches. I stood there reading it, half laughing, half speechless. She'd spent thousands of dollars to accuse me of stealing half a ruler's worth of lake. Then came the lawsuit. Filed in county court for encroachment, a real official claim. And because that wasn't dramatic enough, Vivien took her case to social media. The Willow Creek Estates Facebook group exploded with posts about a difficult neighbor who refused to respect community standards. Within days, strangers I'd never met were calling me a troublemaker, a property value threat. While she was busy rallying her digital army, I went old school. Courthouse basement, dusty files, stacks of deeds. I wanted the truth, not gossip. That's when I found the first breadcrumb that would change everything. Old survey plats showing something bigger than any 6-inch dispute. Something about water rights no one had bothered to read in decades. Vivien thought she was building a wall of pressure. She had no idea she just pushed me straight toward the document that could bring her whole empire down. If you've ever opened an old courthouse file, you know that smell. Paper dust, old ink, and history. That's where I spent my Saturday morning, deep in Pine Ridge's records basement, chasing down every deed my grandfather ever signed. The air was thick, fluorescent lights buzzing like hornets overhead. And then halfway through a box labeled Property Transfers 1950-1960, I found it, the original 1952 deed to our lake. The pages were brittle, the handwriting formal, but one paragraph stopped me cold. It read, "Including all water rights, surface and subsurface, to the underground spring system and tributaries thereto, in perpetuity." Those last 2 words, in perpetuity, mean forever. Not until the HOA says otherwise. Not until developers redraw a map. Forever. I realized what that meant. The same underground spring feeding my lake didn't stop at my fence line. It ran beneath the entire Willow Creek subdivision. The wells drilled for their lawns, kitchens, and showers were tapping into my aquifer. For 15 years they'd been pulling water that legally belonged to my family. I called Tom Martinez right there in the courthouse parking lot. When I read him that paragraph, he went silent, then laughed. The kind of laugh that says, "You just found a nuclear bomb in legal form." By Monday morning, the tables had turned. We weren't defending a dock anymore. We were defending an ecosystem, and every drop of water beneath it. That afternoon, a sheriff's deputy walked into one of Vivien's glittering HOA dinner parties and served her papers. 40 people watched the Queen of Willow Creek realize she'd just declared war on a man who literally owned the groundwater under her throne. The week after Vivien got served, my property turned into a circus. Trucks started showing up at sunrise. Clipboards, vests, flashing lights. First it was Fish and Wildlife, then County Health, then the EPA, and finally Code Enforcement. Every one of them said the same thing. "We got a complaint." You didn't need a detective to figure out who filed them. They walked my property like I was running a black market landfill. One inspector even asked where I stored the waste barrels. I told him, "Buddy, the only thing I store out here are fishing poles and peace of mind." One by one, they left shaking their heads. No violations, no citations, nothing. Just clean water and a tired man with too much patience. But the funny thing about bureaucracy, it cuts both ways. While Vivien was wasting taxpayer time, I was making friends with the people she annoyed. That's how I met Dolores Martinez, a retired county clerk with a memory sharper than barbed wire. Over coffee so strong it could strip paint, she told me something jaw-dropping. Marcus, Willow Creek Estates was built on protected wetlands. Turns out, the developers promised federal regulators they'd preserve all natural water features forever. Violating that promise isn't a slap on the wrist, it's federal law. So I started watching. And at dawn one Saturday, I caught Vivien's landscaping crew dumping grass clippings, fertilizer, and muddy debris straight into my lake. I filmed everything 3 weekends in a row, timestamps, GPS data, crystal clear footage. When I traced their business license, my jaw dropped again. Pristine Landscaping LLC. 40% owned by Richard Blackwater, Vivien's husband. By Monday morning, my EPA complaint was filed, and by Friday, Richard's company had lost 3 county contracts. The HOA war had just gone federal. You know that feeling when something's wrong before you even see it? That's what hit me the second I turned down my driveway that Sunday evening. The air smelled wrong, sharp, metallic like pennies soaked in bleach. My lake, usually crystal clear under the moonlight, glowed a sickly blue-green, the color of antifreeze. Then I saw her. Big Bertha, my prize base, the legend of this lake, floating belly up near the dock. Around her, hundreds more fish, every shape and size, bobbed in silence. The water wasn't alive anymore. It was poisoned. I called the county environmental emergency hotline. Within an hour, Officer Jim Patterson arrived with a hazmat team. They moved like scientists in a crime scene. Test kits, gloves, clipboards. The smell burned our eyes. Patterson dipped his testing strip, watched it turn from green to deep purple, and said quietly, "Industrial strength copper sulfate. Someone nuked your lake." He didn't sugarcoat it. This wasn't vandalism. This was felony destruction of property, and possibly environmental terrorism. He told me not to touch anything and began collecting samples. The next morning, Mrs. Henderson across the street showed me her doorbell footage. Clear as day. A Clearwater Solutions truck rolling in at 2:17 a.m. 2 figures in hazmat suits unloading canisters, dumping them into the water, gone by 2:43. 26 minutes to erase 70 years of family legacy. Vivien had hired professionals under a fake emergency algae control order. She paid $3,500 cash to destroy what generations had built. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, was that she hadn't just poisoned my fish. She'd poisoned her own neighborhood's drinking water. And that right there was the beginning of her downfall. The morning after the chemical dump, I couldn't shake the smell of copper from my hands. I sent a sample to an independent lab in Raleigh, just to know how bad it really was. 3 days later, the report came in. When I read the numbers, my stomach dropped. Copper sulfate levels, 4 times higher than the EPA's safe drinking water standard. Not just a local spill, not just a lake problem, a public health crisis. And here's the part that still gives me chills. The same underground spring that feeds my lake runs straight beneath Willow Creek Estates. The same system their wells pull from. That means every shower, every kitchen faucet, every cup of coffee in those 847 homes now carried the same poison that killed Big Bertha. Vivien hadn't just killed fish. She'd contaminated her own neighborhood. I called Tom Martinez, my attorney, and told him what the lab found. For a few seconds, he didn't say a word. Then quietly, "Marcus, she's done. You don't just have a defense, you've got leverage most lawyers dream about." That's when it hit me. My grandfather hadn't just bought land, he'd bought the water rights in perpetuity, meaning every drop those homes had been using for 15 years was legally mine. The situation flipped overnight. I wasn't the man defending his dock anymore. I was the man who held the legal keys to an entire community's water supply, now tainted by the woman who'd spent months trying to destroy me. This wasn't revenge. This was law, physics, and karma converging at once, and as I looked out over that poisoned water, I realized the fight had just shifted from my backyard to the courtroom, the EPA, and every household Vivien thought she ruled. Once I understood what Vivien had unleashed, I knew this wasn't a fight I could handle alone. So I built a team, not of warriors, but of specialists. First was Rebecca Torres, an environmental attorney from Raleigh who'd made her career bankrupting corporations that thought polluting was just part of business. When she saw my documents, she leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowed. "Marcus, this isn't a lawsuit, it's a masterclass waiting to happen." Next came Dr. James Mitchell, a hydrogeologist from NC State who could read aquifers the way hunters read tracks. We stood knee-deep in my lake while he traced the flow of contamination through the limestone beneath us. "Single-source spring," he said, pointing toward the subdivision. "Every house pulls from the same vein. They'll start tasting it in 6 to 8 weeks." His readings confirmed it. 800 to 1,000 homes were now in danger. To make sure the story reached beyond the courtroom, I called Sarah Morgan, an investigative journalist who'd taken down 2 HOAs for corruption. She took one look at my evidence and said, "This will make national news before it even hits court." Rebecca's strategy was simple, but lethal. Hit from every direction at once. Federal water rights violation, EPA emergency intervention, state criminal charges for dumping, civil suits for property damage. Overwhelm them before they could even coordinate. Then came the most important piece, the settlement plan. I told Rebecca I didn't want to bankrupt 847 innocent families. We'd waive the water rights back payments if the HOA funded restoration, forced Vivien's resignation, and accepted federal oversight. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability, reform, and taking back control from a tyrant who thought she was untouchable. When people like Vivien Blackwater start losing control, they don't apologize, they panic. And panic makes them dangerous. The first sign came quietly. The owner of Clearwater Solutions, the same company that dumped poison into my lake, called me one night. His voice was shaky. "You're not going to believe this, Mr. Reed. She offered me $10,000 cash to destroy the service records." He'd recorded the whole conversation. Her voice crisp and professional, turning desperate. "I just need those files gone." That's not a request, it's obstruction of justice. Next, I noticed a beat-up gray sedan tailing me around town. The driver was a private investigator named Rick Patterson, hired by Vivien to dig up dirt. Except his version of investigation included trying to break into my truck outside the hardware store. I watched him do it from the checkout line. He didn't get far. The police did. Then came the anonymous complaints. Calls to the state licensing board claiming my solar business operated without permits. Total fiction, but it cost me weeks of paperwork and $3,000 in legal fees to prove innocence I already had. Meanwhile, Willow Creek residents were getting sick. Kids with stomach pain, pets refusing to drink tap water, parents complaining about metallic taste and rashes. Vivien went online claiming it was seasonal mineral buildup and proposed a $500 special assessment for infrastructure upgrades. Translation: she wanted homeowners to pay to fix the disaster she caused, but the cracks were showing. HOA Treasurer Patricia Morgan noticed a $3,500 landscaping expense. No receipts, no explanation. When pressed, Vivien threatened to sue her own board. That's when Patricia started digging. And what she found next: embezzlement, falsified budgets, and HOA funds used for personal vendettas would turn Vivien's presidency into her own indictment. By the time the EPA finished its testing, Willow Creek Estates was in chaos. Parents were panicking, property values were dropping, and rumor turned into full-blown fear. So the county called a public meeting, the biggest Pine Ridge had ever seen. 300 people packed into the community center, shoulder to shoulder, sweat and tension thick in the air. News cameras lined the back wall. You could feel something big was about to happen. On stage sat Vivien Blackwater, still in her designer suit, pretending nothing was wrong. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. At the front row, EPA agents laid out their charts, red bars climbing high across every screen. Copper sulfate contamination, the lead investigator said flatly. Levels 4 times above federal safety standards. The room erupted. Parents shouting, homeowners demanding answers. Someone yelled, "Who dumped the chemicals?" Vivien opened her mouth to speak, but the investigator cut her off. "We're working with law enforcement," she said, looking directly at her. The crowd followed that gaze like a wave turning toward the storm. That's when Patricia Morgan, now acting HOA president, took the mic. "Marcus Reed has something to say." I walked up slowly, holding the 1952 deed in my hand. "This document," I said, "grants my family ownership of all surface and subsurface water, in perpetuity. That means every drop under this subdivision legally belongs to me." Gasps filled the room. Then I added, "I'm waiving all back payments, $30 million if we restore the lake, remove this board's president, and bring real accountability." The timing couldn't have been more perfect. A deputy stepped onto the stage, cuffs in hand. "Mrs. Blackwater," he said, "you're under arrest for environmental crimes and obstruction of justice." Her smile finally cracked, and the room exploded with applause. 6 months after the arrest, I stood at sunrise on my rebuilt dock, coffee steaming in my hand, watching the water ripple clear again. The copper smell was gone, replaced by honeysuckle, cypress, and the sound of life returning. Tiny fish darted near the surface. The EPA called it a miracle of bioremediation. I just called it home again. Dr. Mitchell's restoration plan had worked perfectly. Natural filtration, native plant regrowth, strategic water cycling. The contamination levels dropped to 0 faster than anyone predicted. The first restock of bass, Big Bertha's descendants, hit the water last spring. Watching them swim felt like watching hope come back to life. Legally, the dominoes fell hard. Vivien Blackwater pleaded guilty to environmental destruction, illegal dumping, embezzlement, and obstruction. 3 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, $75,000 restitution, and 200 hours of community service cleaning rivers she once polluted. Her husband filed for divorce. Her law license? Gone forever. But out of all that destruction came something good. The settlement created the Grandfather's Lake Environmental Trust, $250,000 in funding for school programs that teach kids about water conservation. Every month, local students visit the lake to learn how fragile and powerful nature really is. The HOA restructured too: new board, open voting, financial transparency, and a residents' rights charter. Willow Creek isn't ruled by fear anymore. It's a real community again. As for me, I still fish every Saturday, sometimes with kids from the subdivision. We laugh, we share stories, and we keep that lake alive. In the end, Vivien tried to destroy what she couldn't control. And all she did was help create something stronger, cleaner, and more honest. Because sometimes the best revenge is restoration.